Good morning, boys and girls. Before we dive into our Bible story this morning, I want you to go and grab 3 random items from your house. It can be anything, but they need to be 3 different things. Don't think too much about it. Just run and grab the first 3 things you find. You have about 30 seconds, okay, before we go to the next part of our story, okay? So, go! All right, come back in, guys. Do you have your 3 items? Okay, awesome, great. So glad you found at least 3 things in your house. Here are the 3 things that I found. I found this nice, soft, cozy blanket. I found a Princess Anna birthday card, obviously. And I found a kitchen chair. Okay, so we're going to come back to those 3 items in just a second, so keep your items close. But first, what does it mean to be kind? What is kindness? It's a hard word to describe and define because kindness can mean so many different things. Being kind can mean caring for others and showing love, being helpful, being thoughtful, being selfless, listening, and so many more things. There are so many ways that we can be kind to others. And it's awesome because God is creative in the way that He is kind to us. God has given us our families and our friends, the people who love us and help take care of us, the people who listen to us when we need someone to talk to. God has given us our homes, our clothes, our food, and even medicine to help protect us and to keep us safe. But God has invited us to be kind to the people around us. And there are so many ways that we can do that. So I want us to get a little creative. You had to find 3 items in your house. Look at those items and think, how could I use those items to show kindness to others? Or how can this item remind me to be kind to others? So let's look at the 3 items that I found. So first, I had the blanket. A blanket can be used to show kindness in a lot of ways. One way may be to give it to someone who doesn't have a home, because in the winter it gets cold, and a blanket could be really nice in helping keep someone safe. I can use this blanket to show kindness by giving it to someone else, to someone who needs it. The second item I had was a birthday card. Now, this birthday card was obviously written to me. I'm not going to give this card to anyone else. But this birthday card reminds me that sometimes it's nice to send people things in the mail, just to send them a note to let them know how important they are to me. So I can show kindness by mailing a card or a note to someone. The last item I found was my kitchen chair. Now, my kitchen table has 4 chairs, but I live here by myself. I only need 1 chair. When I look at my kitchen table and the other 3 chairs, it reminds me that I can be kind by inviting other people to sit at the table with me. I can invite other people to eat with me. Maybe even if I'm out somewhere and I see someone eating by themselves, I can just invite them to eat with me and show kindness by not leaving people out. In our story this morning, King David uses a chair or an empty seat at his table to show kindness to someone. Now, if you remember, David had become king of the entire nation of Israel. The land had once been divided, but David has now united it, and Jerusalem has become the capital. Last week, we talked about David bringing the Ark of the Covenant, something that was very important to the people, to the city of Jerusalem. David and his armies continued to battle some of the surrounding nations, and in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 15, it says that David reigned over all of Israel, doing what was just and right for his people. David wasn't always perfect, but he really did try to do the right thing. Before David became king, he had worked for a man named Saul, and if you remember, Saul had been the king before David. But then Saul got jealous of David, and David had to run and hide from him. But David's best friend Jonathan was Saul's son. Can you imagine having a best friend, but you have to hide from his dad? Crazy. By the time David became king, Saul and Jonathan had both died, and it was really sad. Even though David was king, he still missed his best friend. And one day, David asked, "Is there anyone alive from Saul and Jonathan's family? Jonathan was my best friend, and I want to show kindness to his family." Ziba, who had worked for Saul, told David about Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who still lived near Jerusalem. Now you see, Mephibosheth had been hurt earlier in his life and was unable to walk. But David invited him and brought him into the palace. And let's now take a look at what happened next. We're going to be reading out of 2 Samuel chapter 9. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to him to honor him. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore all of the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, the grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. David wanted to show kindness to someone in Saul and Jonathan's family. But when Mephibosheth came to David, he honestly wasn't sure what was going to happen. He wasn't sure if David wanted to kill him or have him leave Israel. He really didn't know. But David showed him kindness and actually gave him the land that his grandfather Saul had once ruled over. He gave him a seat at his table, a seat at the king's table, a seat at David's table. Mephibosheth would be taken care of. He would have money and food and land, and he would have position as someone who gets to eat with the king, and he was kind of treated like the king's son. David showed Mephibosheth and his family kindness. He loved them and helped take care of them. He invited them to eat with him, and he showed them kindness. God invites us to show kindness to people too. Earlier, I asked you to find 3 things in your house. So look at those items. How could you use those items to show kindness this week? Maybe you can't think of anything with those items, but stop and think, what is one way that you can show kindness to someone this week? Maybe it's sending a card in the mail or calling someone on the phone. Maybe it's giving old toys or clothes away to someone who could use them. Maybe it's just sharing with your brother or your sister, or doing chores around the house to help out your mom and dad. Whatever it is, find one way to intentionally be kind this week. David did the right thing by being kind to Mephibosheth. How can you be kind this week?